well, let's jump in tonight. So Backcountry Cooking Skills Workshop, of course, today, March 22. I'm Brent Freeman. Pleasure to be with you all tonight. And on a fun topic. It's just, I love talking about backcountry cooking. So Camptown, many of you are familiar, just given joining our past workshops, and but we are a youth development nonprofit, and this is our mission statement here. We get to do some really cool work, and so this is a trip that we took with some young people, part of a county-wide youth assistance program, backpacking in the wilderness of Tennessee, under a pretty cool natural arch. And so here's our agenda for tonight. We will just, again, sort of overview about Camptown. We're gonna break our session into a few categories tonight. First, talking about menu planning, meal planning, so that we can eat well. And then we'll talk sort of about some of the equipment, old school to lightweight, and some techniques with the different equipment. Man, I would love to be able to share some of the food and be able to sort of, pass around, but obviously in our virtual context, that's not possible. We'll talk some menu ideas, some meal ideas. Variety is the spice of life, and so what are some ways to be creative out on the trail with our meals? And then just some tips and tricks of the trade. And so make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A. And in fact, I'd invite you, as you have questions throughout, just stop me, right? We're a small enough group tonight that I want to make sure this is really sort of hitting what you'd like. And it's also okay if you're like, I don't know what questions I have yet. That's okay. As we're going, just stop me. And I will say that food is one of the highlights of a good backpacking trip. And so let's see, I've got a couple more in the waiting room. Get them in. There we go. Beautiful. All right. And so for those just joining us, we're just capping our agenda. And so as we go through tonight, if you have, like I said, questions, drop them in the chat bar, or if you want to share sort of why you're interested in tonight's workshop, feel free to do that in the chat bar. And that really helps me to again, make sure that I'm targeting in our dialogue and whatnot, what you're most interested in, because there's a lot to talk about. And so we'll scratch the surface tonight. All right, so I'll give you just an introduction to Camptown. Those of you that were with us last time, or last month, got to see a video of one of our backpacking trips. This is another program that Camptown is really proud of, and it's an introductory experience for young people in Indianapolis primarily who don't have sort of nature exposure and nature-based experiences, and it's called our Natural Wonders Day Camp. So I just want to show you this quick video clip to give you a sense of what we're up to here at Camptown.
Ready, set, go!
All right, so that's again an overview of our Natural Wonders Day Camps. Bonus points, if anybody can drop in the chat bar which state park that program was at, that Natural Wonders Day Camp. You might have recognized sort of the lake and the dock and some of the features there. Yeah, Mary got it. Fort Benjamin Harrison State Park. And so great resource here in the northeast side of Indianapolis and Lawrence. So again, about Camptown, high impact Indianapolis youth serving nonprofit, over 40,000 youth that we've worked with in the last 30 years. We teach life skills through outdoor adventures, typically 3,500 students, youth per year. And most of those students are in poverty and most are also persons of color. And our trips range from in-school environmental ed to 5-day wilderness backpacking, whitewater rafting trips. Over 95% of our participants receive financial assistance, and that is thanks to the generosity of our supporters and our partners. And so you were invited, many of you, to give a suggested donation, and we thank you for doing that to participate in our mission and our cause. And so we know that these programs are beneficial for kids. They build leadership, teamwork, confidence, and respect. Those numbers are what our students tell us that they've grown. So sort of self-reported from the young people that participate. These programs work, and they are for the betterment of our young people. So if you want to learn more, I won't talk more about sort of Camptown directly tonight. Follow us, be a part of our story. You're welcome to attend an event and or subscribe to our e-newsletter. And so to the core agenda of what we're up to tonight is around our backcountry cooking. And our first section of that is around meal planning so that we can eat well. And so I'd love to hear from you. And again, try to be interactive. And, I know that in the online world, that can be a bit challenging sometimes. But what are some important considerations when you're planning a backcountry cooking menu? And if you've never done it before, that's okay too. What do you imagine are some of the considerations when planning backcountry cooking? Good. Yeah. So food storage, I see. Good, Jen. Yeah. Weight of food and equipment. Excellent. Excellent. And so I'm sort of reading off of the chat bar for those who are wondering where folk are chiming in. And so you're of course welcome to speak into this as well. And so those are a couple important considerations and will impact what you might be able to eat on your next backcountry trip. And of course, backcountry isn't just backpacking. It could be canoe packing, and it could be who knows? It could be snowshoeing or dog sledding, which, interesting fact, that's what my wife and I did on our honeymoon. And so there are other ways to get into the backcountry, but backpacking is the most common and most accessible. So with menu planning, keep it simple, especially at first. And so there are some ways to sort of ruin your trip, and that is, burnt food, spoiled food, not enough food, or you're too exhausted to prepare the food that you've brought. And so keep it simple. Work your way up to those gourmet meals, which we'll give some ideas later in tonight's workshop. A balanced diet. And I know that I feel like I'm a health teacher or a dietitian saying balanced diet, fresh fruit and veggies. They are on the trail a real treat, especially when you're eating, if you're on for a multi-day trip and you're eating a lot of, processed foods or highly preserved foods. Boy, it's nice to sort of sink your teeth into a fresh apple or orange or something like that. And, don't forget the fiber, especially with all those processed and preserved food. That fiber is a really critical for not only sort of our digestive system, but obviously for the health of our muscular systems as well. And then just some considerations are thinking about repackaging our food. And we'll look at some of our food sort of options tonight. I've got a few behind me, and we'll think about what are those that need repacked and how do you do that well. We'll also look at how might you pre-measure, right, and save yourself the trouble and the stress of having to do that while you're cooking on a log or in a backcountry less than ideal. You're not in the kitchen, right? And then thinking ahead even on cleanup. And so how do you make it easy to just pack it up and go instead of have a bunch of, say, dishes to do, for instance. And weight and calories, and this is sometimes alarming, but you can burn, if you're hiking 10 miles with a 40-pound pack, it is not hard to burn 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. Or if you're canoeing, you're portaging, you're carrying that boat above head, it is not hard to get a great workout, which means, flip side of that, you get to eat well. And so we always recommend a full menu plan before a backcountry trip, and this would prevent the food spoiling and or not having enough, or not sort of thinking ahead to what is that if you're on a 3-day trip, what is that day 3 breakfast, so that I'm not, scrounging for the right sort of calories. And it also helps to see the plan and make some variety. And so this is not rocket science in terms of the plan, but you can kind of see just an example of, divided by meals, and, kind of an opportunity for us as we plan groups. Obviously, we're purchasing at scale and purchasing in volume. And so this helps us from that perspective as well. A few more planning tips is it's okay to carb load. You're again burning a lot of calories, and I love just munching on, trail mix and other kind of high calorie dense foods while I'm walking, while I'm hiking. But look for those complex carbs like whole grains. We'll talk, long grain rice or whole grain rice, granolas. These are, a little bit more sustaining in terms of, the depth of the calorie load or the nutrition in those complex carbs. If it's colder, I always recommend having food before bed. That's like right before bed. Get that metabolism burning, which really does keep internal body heat going, as sort of that internal furnace for those colder nights. Water purification. I know those of you that were in the backpacking workshop, we looked at, iodine tablets, and there's of course other options for filtering water, which you always want to make sure you do in the backcountry. Of course, you can boil as well, but sometimes those iodine tabs or even water from, a stream or a lake could have some flavor, right? Flavor that you don't want. And so I love bringing those drink packets. There's, from Gatorade to lemonade to Crystal Light for those, preferring sugar-free. But it does sort of freshen up that beverage and, make you look forward to drinking it as opposed to chugging it, just to tolerate it. And then refrigeration is key. And I know food storage, Mary mentioned, in one of those pieces. Not only are we thinking about storing from animals and critters, hanging our foods or using a bear bag, bear canister, whenever that's recommended by the local authorities or local regulating bodies. But we got to think about refrigeration and spoil time, right? Especially if we want fresh food. And so we got to think of, in terms of produce, if we're going multiple days, what's shelf stable, or what's, going to stay fresh without refrigeration. And obviously, greens are going to get wilty, right? And they can't be refrigerated, and especially if they have any exposure to the sun. But things like peppers, which again, that's a luxury. But oranges are really a good trail food, and it's okay if they get a little squished. They don't bruise. You might get a little juice, obviously, opening them up. But I love an orange on top of a vista, right, on that sunny day. There's not much better. So those are just some ideas about meal planning. And I'm going to go through some menu ideas and sort of specific recipes, if you will, a little bit later on. But I want to pause here before we talk about equipment and techniques and just see if there are any questions or comments. So I'll use what in teacher world we'd call wait time and let you have a question. Okay, well, we'll keep rolling. And so we're going to divide these into a couple categories for cooking techniques tonight: lightweight cooking and old school cooking. And there's certainly more ways you could divide in terms of cooking techniques and equipment, but these are a couple of broad categories. And Mary asked another good question about what about food waste and container waste? And we are believers in leave no trace principles at Camptown. And so we teach, pack it in, pack it out. We teach that we're responsible for proper disposal of our waste. And in the sort of the purest form, that means any leftover food or any obviously waste, we're packing that out. And so that is a major consideration in our menu planning so that we don't have to pack out 1, leftovers, or 2, extra trash. And so we'll look at, again, I've got some different food options here in the back. We'll walk through these in a little bit, but there are ways to go really light on waste so that you're only packing out, the empty, bag and not the box and not the directions and not the, not 4 pieces of trash, per food. And so good question. And so what are, of these two styles, lightweight and old school, I'd be curious if anybody would be inclined towards old school, or if you all would say, yeah, I think I'd be more interested in lightweight, and then I'll unpack them. And so you can just drop in the chat bar if you would, or of course you're welcome to chime in. Which of these would you be more interested? Or yeah, lightweight, yeah. And that's the direction that I've gone for sure. And there's so many great options. Lightweight can get expensive quickly. And so there are ways to keep it simpler, but there's also some appeal to some of the older methods. And so we'll talk about that for a second. So lightweight, the pros of this, obviously the weight. Yeah, for sure. If you're in a campsite, we hear from Mary, if you're in a campsite, then you can bring way more. And out of your car, we consider that front country. And so you're much more, accessible to running water and, your vehicle, potentially refrigeration, or at least a cooler and ice and these sorts of things. But in the backcountry, you're unlikely to be bringing as much of those items. And that may, if you're on a multi-day canoe trip, I've brought coolers of meat and those sorts of things. But a lot of what we're covering tonight would be perfect for the backpacker. And so the pros or the advantages of the lightweight methods are they're fast and simple, right? And there are plenty of no-cook options, and you can just sort of keep moving on the trail and keep it very simple. And the hint here is pre-make and a prep into baggies, right? So here are some ideas for some of those pre-make meals and things that can be put into Ziploc bags. And these are, again, these are sort of, some of them are very obvious. Peanut butter jelly on bagels, right? Bagels don't smash like bread. Bagels are much more dense, so you get both the kind of calorie rich, but also they're easier, better packing. And making that in advance is so nice because one, I think it helps the flavor. You let the jelly or the honey kind of soak into the bagel, but then you don't have to mess with a knife and scraping and just getting all sticky and whatnot on the trail. And so you can make that a couple days ahead of time, and it still holds up pretty well. And then another fun one, PBCHR, which was peanut butter, of course, cinnamon, honey, and raisin. I have liked smoked salmon, and so if you're into that sort of flavor and into the fish, you can eat that with some crackers, like wheat thins could pack pretty well. And then even bring, if you're eating it the first day, some flavored cream cheese, like some sour cream onion type of flavor, or chives, or and just dip those crackers into cream cheese and salmon, and it's a delicious trailside lunch. Another easy one, summer sausage chunk cheese, just cut off a slice with a knife, right? And you can be, essentially your backpacker's Lunchable, if you will. And then some breakfast ideas, and these are some lightweight again. You've got granola with dehydrated milk, is a delicious one, and pudding or cheesecake. And so I'll turn here to the notice something on my bar here. Let me make sure don't have anyone waiting outside the room. Okay, I think we're in good shape. But these little pudding containers, right? These are almost hard to find now because there's so much sort of pre-made pudding. But these with some instant non-fat dry milk, which has also gotten harder to find. You pre-mix the amounts, right, and put it into a Ziploc bag, and then you can just add water, and you kind of can mix it up with your hands, just squish it, squeeze it, let it set up. If that water is a little bit colder, then it's delicious, cold as well. But it's a really delightful treat. And you can do the same with like a Jell-O cheesecake, or one of those prepackaged mixes for a dessert. And so that's a good one on the trail and a nice treat. And of course, that non-fat dry milk also mixes really well with just some granola. And you can do the same thing in a Ziploc bag and you can put the powdered milk in advance, and then you're just adding water and you're just mixing it up, with your hands, letting it sit up about 10 or 15 minutes before mealtime. And so very dry and light to carry, and you can get more water on the trail and be able to make those dehydrated treats. And so let's see if we can get here to the next slide, and I'll show you some of the equipment. Here are, oh, sorry, those were non-cook options. The options on the past slide. These are some lightweight and boil only options, right? So they're easy to cook and prepare with just a boiling stove. And you can see my colleague there, Trey Clayton, behind his mask, holding one of these up. And this one is a power rice blend, and this is a pretty good one there. You can see the brand Knorr. Lots of he's big into the organic and the kind of lighter on artificial flavors and preservatives, but these are delicious. Just they're very herb rich and herb seasoned and pretty healthy, and you're not going to see as still high in sodium, but not as much as some of these others that are more processed as well. And so here's another. This is actually, I skipped. This is a no cook option, and this is Uncle Ben's Ready Rice. And of course, there's multiple flavors of these, and you can get chicken or all kinds of different flavors. And these are mostly cooked. If you're making this at home, you pop it in the microwave for 90 seconds, and it's completely cooked. But it's still pretty tender. So even without cooking, after a day on the trail, sometimes it's nice to put your feet up, not cook. And these are very delicious, calorie-rich trail dinners. So with the boiling options, we recommend using freezer Ziplocs and insulated envelopes. And so this is a really cool trick, but you can essentially package anything that you would just cook with water. So think noodles, think rice, think ramen, even these mashed potatoes, and there are several different delicious varieties of these powdered mashed potatoes. And so you can see roasted garlic, baby reds for those of you like me that really like the red potatoes, sour cream and chopped. So a variety, right? You don't have to get kind of stuck in a certain mode with that. Those can be cooked in those packages if they're not going to melt or dissolve, but they can also be cooked in a Ziploc freezer bag. And so it's really nice to pre-measure and put into a small Ziploc freezer bag. And then once that is cooking, these insulated, these are mailing envelopes, right? But these are insulated. There are a lot of different varieties, but you can notice there's a thickness to them and kind of a layer in between, if you will, of that recycled material. You can fold that Ziploc bag up, tuck it in here, and fold it up, and it keeps that heat in there, and so the bag doesn't cool too quickly. It allows the rice or the pasta to really fully cook through. And these aren't expensive, right? So it's a nice kind of hack in terms of for lower cost. And so I wanted to show a little bit of the equipment for a lightweight option. This is a Primus stove, and it's got a really nice cooktop, and so you can go with a larger pot or pan system on top of this. And this is what I used for a recipe that I'll share with you in just a little bit. And it's a very nice and efficient cooker with a little bit of variability in the flame, so you can sort of change the temperature and whatnot, which in this option you can't. But this is my go-to for boiling, and this is, it's called a jet boil. And what's nice is this is the whole thing. This is the pot, this is the stove, this is the fuel and everything. And so it all comes right out. And so this is the stove system inside of the Nalgene sized bottle. And all you do for this one is you pop off the bottom, which also doubles as a cup. So this is perfect for that, whether it's coffee in the morning, if you want to put granola in a cup, or something like that. And then this attaches right to the bottom of the Jetboil. And then I won't cook in it because it's empty and we're inside, but it is this easy to start. You turn on the fuel, if you can see that, turn on the fuel, and then voila, and you have your boiling. And so this can boil 2 cups of water in less than 2 minutes. And so that's why they call it the Jetboil. It's very efficient, fairly compact, fairly light, and you have no other dishes. What this isn't good for is simmering or a slow cook. And so this is your boil only. And they have tried with their family system to give you a simmering option. I have not found that this is that effective at simmering, but this is the family kit for Jetboil with multiple sizes, and this is useful when I go out, with my kids or something like that. So this is the family size Jetboil, and you're getting a little bit away from lightweight, but when you consider that could cook for multiple people at one time, it is still a pretty lightweight cook system. And so those are a couple of the nice options. And yeah, again, some good comments there. Definitely want to try the cheesecake, and loving the ideas. That's great. And so these are some of the lightweight options. Now, if we weren't being very original, we would just tell you, get the freeze-dried backpacker meals. And I do have one of those here to be able to show you. This is a Mountain House option. These are for the person that doesn't mind spending $8, $10, $12 on a meal and wants it to be very quick and very simple with no prep. And so you can walk into your basic outdoor store. I think these are even at Walmart, and purchase some of these. This is one of many brands. They're not bad. They aren't as good as what food might be like at home, but they're, freeze dried and dehydrated. And so this is a chili mac with beef. You can find, lime chicken, you can find macaroni, you can find all kinds of different varieties on the Mountain House or other brands of dehydrated. And so that's an option for you. And then, prep for those is just pour the boiling water into those bags, let them sit, eat right out of the bag, and then you can collapse that and it's in your trash. And so questions about how expensive is a Jetboil and where do you find them? The Jetboil stoves, they're probably running about $100 for one of those stove units. The fuel canisters are disposable, and those have to be refilled as they're consumed. And so that is including the canister for cooking in as well. You can get stoves, smaller stoves, for cheaper, and you're going to buy then separately your pots and pans and that kind of system. And so it just depends on what you're looking for. And you can get stoves for much more reasonable. In fact, there is a way to make a stove, backcountry cooking stove, from an old aluminum can or a used aluminum can. And that is simply, there are ways online, just you find that, you cut the can down and you essentially create a very small single burner stove, and you can pour any sort of flammable fuel in there. A very common one is just rubbing alcohol, and it generates a nice little heat bed, and you can cook on top, with a pot or a pan or whatever you would like. And I think another easy one is the chafing, the what they use at catering. Picture going under, right, to warm your green beans or whatever's at a big catered event. Those chafing, those little flames that they use, that's another inexpensive option for a backcountry stove. That's your fuel all in one. You just need to bring something to be able to light it with. And so those are creative options as well. All right, so moving along, check on time, doing okay, just after 7. And so here are some of the kind of old school cooking techniques. And again, use old school kind of a little bit tongue in cheek with this. And I have worked at a summer camp where we literally would pack Dutch ovens on backpacking trips. And if you have used Dutch ovens, you know they can be quite heavy. We used aluminum, which is lighter than cast iron, but still probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 pounds for one of these Dutch ovens. And when you're cooking over open flame or, and needing to gather and collect firewood, I always encourage know your local regulations. There are places that you can never create, open fire or backcountry fire. And that's really to preserve the humus or the local, the kind of the environment and the regeneration, of the forest floor or of the desert, if you will, where there isn't much growing. And then there are times where it's seasonal burn bans, right? And so we were in Colorado last fall, and with the forest fires, there was very heavy burn restrictions. And so know your local regulations. That matters too for menu planning, right? And being aware of what you're able to do. There are times where a stove fire may also be banned. And so knowing ahead of time is important. But if you use cast iron at home or have ever used it in the backcountry, it is amazing to cook on, right? There's so much fun things you can cook and be creative here. This is a smaller, right? This is a 6-inch skillet. And so it doesn't weigh, 20 pounds, and it can double as a little protection mechanism, if you're to run into, that grizzly bear or, I'm teasing about that. But on an open flame, a couple of tips, and boy, I wish I could. I'm lamenting that I couldn't start a fire with us tonight and cook over an open flame and be able to share that delicious food with you all. But the way to do it, build that fire up, build the flame up, get it sort of in a roaring flame, but then to break it down and cook on the coals or the embers. It's much easier to control your heat and not burn and not scorch. And you can really manipulate your coals and embers into basically like an oven, and being able to turn up or down, a burner or the temperature of your oven at home. And you can obviously cook with a tripod over an open flame and hang a pot. That's a very common sort of Boy Scout method to boil big amounts of water or cook a big stew or something like that. You could also use you can grill, right? Or you can use roasters to roast on an open flame. You can make those in the backcountry, and so you don't have to bring the hot dog stick, but you can literally carve those out in the backcountry. So thinking about meats, with cast iron, it's much easier to prepare a lot of different varieties of meats, and this is approachable in the backcountry, but know the signs of spoilage. And I was pre-freeze, I freeze my meat so that I know it's going to stay fine to eat. And definitely within the first 24 hours, I do try to consume if I'm bringing meat into the backcountry. Other things like dairy, for instance, like a block of cheese, that can last much longer than 24 hours in the backcountry, but not everyone's comfortable with that. And so, but just know those kind of spoilage rates and be prepared in menu planning. I mentioned Dutch ovens, but they open a variety of possibilities. Things like cobblers. It's a very easy dump cobbler that's literally coat the Dutch oven with butter. Dump pie filling of any variety, cherry, peach, apple, you name it, and pour a box of vanilla cake mix on top. Stir it up a little bit, Dutch oven, cook that. In 20 minutes or so, you have a delicious cobbler. I don't care who you are, it's very, very tasty. Brownies, breakfast rolls, you can make in those Dutch ovens as well. And, one of the keys with getting a variety and baking is indirect heat and not scorching, right, what you're cooking. And so thinking about that percentage of heat on top versus on bottom, It's great. A lot of Dutch ovens that are made for cooking outside. You can actually build a twig fire on top. And so you got coals on the bottom. You can put some coals on top, whether with tweezers or a stick or a sort of a tool to be able to put coals on top. You can also light a small twig fire on top. And again, that gets that indirect heat and really gets some nice cooking going. And so, so I'm talking a lot and want to give you a minute if you have any questions or curiosities. And I see Kathy here in the waiting room. I'm going to let Kathy in, and there's Kathy. All right. And so just want to pause. I love campfire cooking. Just made pizza on the fire for the first time last night. Yum. Yeah, that's one of our menu options here coming up. Abby, thanks for sharing. If you don't mind sharing, how'd you do it? What kind of pizza did you cook on your campfire last night? And so you can either drop in the chat or if you want to unmute and share that. Love to hear. Okay, well, maybe we'll come back to Abby in a little bit and hear about her pizza. All right, so good. And again, feel free to use that chat bar if that's helpful while we're going through tonight. So the question came about the stove and how much a stove might cost. They can be expensive, but if you want to try this and you're not sure what to commit to in terms of a gear investment, you try renting. And we're not the only option, but we are one if you have an interest in renting some of our cooking equipment. So variety is the spice of life. What are some meal ideas and ways to keep things different? And I say that if you're just getting started, maybe ramen noodles sounds awesome. But if you're like us and you go backpacking a lot, you do want to shake it up. Ramen maybe once or twice on a trip, but some variety in those backcountry meals. And so just like Abby making that pizza, this is a very approachable, oh, there it is, very approachable backcountry meal. And she sounds like went all out with the gourmet. Simple dough recipe and sort of fried in the skillet with oil. That sounds awesome. I'm sort of jealous that you had that and I didn't last night. But yeah, with yeast and sounds like from scratch. And you can do that obviously in the backcountry too. Some more shelf stable and easier options are to use pita bread as a crust and or bagel even as a crust, and those are going to last. Those can last 3, 4, 5 days, no problem on a multi-day trip, and they taste pretty good, especially when they get a good bit of that pizza sauce in there. And so bring your typical pizza toppings and typical bring your favorites, right? And most of them can be preserved. Now you could cook that over an open fire with the griddle, just kind of with heat from the bottom. I would recommend using some foil to protect it from burning. You can also use a stove over low heat. And those bagel pizzas are really good on a stove with low heat. And so yeah, and so try it with pita or bagel for crust. It works. Now it probably doesn't taste as good as your homemade dough recipe, but another thing, bring a little bit of garlic salt, and sprinkle that on the crust, and it sort of tastes like a breadstick, which in the backcountry you'll take that. So there's one idea. Another one, bean burritos. And so why not have those in the backcountry? But this one does take some cleanup, right? There's a pot that you're going to have to clean afterwards. But cooking black beans, whether that's already prepped. Now the lighter version is those the dehydrated the dry black beans, and to be able to soak them and then to cook them and use green salsa, salsa verde, and then you're cooking in shredded cheese just at the end. Obviously, that melts quickly. Add spices to your liking. And then the last thing you put in is Fritos. I know it sounds really weird, or it might. Maybe you do this at home all the time. But then scoop this into tortillas. And tortillas are another one of those things that's just, they last, right? They're easy to pack. They're flat. They're light. And they're not going to spoil. They're shelf stable. And so you're scooping that onto a tortilla. Man, I thought, yeah, bean burritos. And then I had these and I was like, those are so delicious. And so you do need a simmer option. You could try cooking this over a fire in a pot. But again, those beans, can be a little bit tricky and time consuming, but delicious meal. And this is our longtime executive director, my colleague, Mr. Don Schaefer. And he's making one of his favorites you can see he's got one of these insulated envelopes, and this is Gota Gota. And this is a spinoff of ramen. And yep, and see from Mary, you can use those tortillas in place of bread. That's exactly right. And Gota Gota has I think an interesting history and a connection to a former staff member here. That was a missionary kid in Sierra Leone, as I understand it. And so, using soy sauce and peanut butter powder and garlic and brown sugar to have this really robust flavor in ramen. And so a nice twist on a typical ramen. And again, you can do that with just the boiling water, just the boiling stove, or even boiling water, over an open fire. And so Gota Gota, you're putting that in Ziplocs. You're going to pour that water in, and about 10 minutes later, you're going to have a delicious dinner, or even a lunch if you wanted to cook lunch. And so I mentioned Mr. Schaefer. He has prepared a workshop, our next actually in this series of virtual outdoor skills workshops, April 19th. And so I heard a couple people speak about camping or wanting to get out with family. And so this next workshop might be for you. So I want a quick little plug, April 19th, 4 weeks from today, same time. Check out our family camping workshop. Registration for that one is on our website. A couple more meal ideas. We have steak and veggies. It seems like I don't eat steak like I maybe used to when 10 or 15 years ago, but a really good, again, smaller, maybe a 6 ounce or something like that, steak, so delicious. And so I've had a bacon wrapped filet in the backcountry. And so you're freezing that, right? You're wrapping it in foil. You can add a seasoning sort of in the front country, before you go out in the backcountry. You can add a little butter square. There's a little bit of that, almost caramely type butter richness, and you can cook that in the foil, right? If you know how to use the flames, you can cook that in the foil. Or of course, if you're gonna go old school and be using some cast iron, this is obviously wonderful for cooking a good cut of steak. And with your steak, consider pre-sliced veggies. And so things like zucchini and squash, sliced, quartered, whatever that is, and put in an olive oil, toss in an olive oil, lots of seasoning and spices. That can be cooked in foil or in a pot and just stirred regularly until it kind of cooks down. Or really easy is a baked potato. Wrap it in foil, cook that in the coals, of an open flame. You can also do a sweet potato. And if you like those plain, there's obviously a lot of flavor in a sweet potato, or bring, a few of your favorite toppings. A little trick for the condiments, right? So whether that's ketchup or salt and pepper, or even honey, or barbecue sauce, or even taco sauce. The little trick is to bring the fast food packs, right? And so you go to Taco Bell and, you get some extra hot sauce. You go to Starbucks where there's a tea, you get a pack of honey. These are perfect for backpacking with very little waste. You're not bringing a whole jar. You're not bringing a whole, tub, if you will, of honey or ketchup or whatever that may be, but you can still add that flavor, which makes a big difference on the trail. So watching our time, 7:17, we're doing well. And of course, going to ask you in a minute, which of these recipes sound interesting to you, not just recipes, ideas for meals, and which one you might try. This one's called mash pot, obviously short for mashed potatoes. And this is with dehydrated milk that I showed you, and you can use any variety of of mashed potatoes, whether flavored or regular. Use some butter. You can use ham. You can freeze that ham. It's diced ham or cubed ham, and corn, which can be packed into Ziplocs, moved from a corn into Ziplocs. Can also be frozen corn. And then as this is cooking, you mix in some of these other toppings. And so because cooking live inside a building that has Wi-Fi is so difficult, and I lament that we couldn't be outside together with this. I have some pictures of me cooking this or preparing this mash pot, and it doesn't do it justice, but you can see the ingredients kind of spread here and what some of these utensils are. I do want to point this out. If you can see right by the lighter and the spoon, there is a small tool, and this is a really handy, it's a pot grabber. Okay, and so it is a something you see in like a Boy Scout patrol box, right? But you can use this to grab the pot and keep your hands from being burnt. I also, if I'm cooking over a fire, I do really like to have an oven mitt, and it just, again, it's going to keep my hands from being burnt and maybe the hair from singeing off of my hands. But this was you see that black pot, this is what mash pot was cooked in. And here are the ingredients. Now, you notice that bacon, that's actually, this doesn't need refrigerated. That's in the same, aisle of the grocery store as dressing. And so it's not refrigerated. And the ham is, and the cheese is. And the cheese, again, the cheese can last multiple days. And when it's already pre-shredded, it's got that potato starch on it, keeps it from sticking together. But a little trick is, this is weird, right? But if the cheese is stuck together in the backcountry, you can use both hands and blow air into that bag, and so make it kind of a balloon, right? Cut the air off, so you have this balloon with this clump of cheese in it, and then you just shake that around. Okay, you shake that cheese, it breaks up, and it becomes those little crumbs of shredded cheese again, because as it warms, it could stick together. And so, yep, good. Yeah, I love seeing that in terms of what Mary might try with her backcountry cooking. So again, here's the mash pot, and so as it's cooking, you can see cooking those the dehydrated mashed potatoes. They don't look like they would be great, but once you get some of that butter in and some of that dehydrated milk, you add the corn, you add the ham. You mix that up, and then the last ingredients there are the bacon and the cheese, and it is a really rich, it's like something that grandmother might bring to the family get together. And so lots of calories, very, very dense, and quite flavorful. And so here's another idea, and again, this is for some variety. Is a Thanksgiving feast, and this is using, say, your roasted garlic mashed potatoes and a stovetop stuffing mix, and this can be pre-packed as well and kind of stripped down so that you're not bringing the box, you're just bringing you're transferring this into a Ziploc bag in which you could actually eat out of. There are people that would add a protein to that. You could be more creative with corn or gravy or rolls, and you do at least need a stove to boil. This is a fun one for those that would like a cholesterol-rich breakfast. Bacon and eggs can actually, I haven't tried this, I must say, but I know folks that have, and it's been successful, is to coat the inside of a brown paper bag with bacon, with a slice or two of bacon and the sort of the oils and the grease on that bacon. Then you're leaving that piece of bacon in, cracking an egg inside the bag. This all sounds weird, right? You're gonna wrap that around a stick, and you're gonna roast that over coals, not a raging flame. it will cook on the inside. And if the bag is moistened by that grease, it will not burn. And you will have bacon and eggs, for breakfast. You can also cook bacon and eggs over flipped over an inverted coffee can with some vents in the top, over a canister of that chafing fuel. And so that's another creative option for a stove. So love to hear from you. We're nearing the end of our time together. And so what might you try? And which of these menu options might you try in your backcountry? And then if you have any favorites that I did not mention, would be curious to hear from you all. And obviously this is a sampling. We couldn't possibly cover all of the ideas in a short time together. Mary's talking about keeping it simple. Yep. And that's right. And start out simple. Baked sweet potato with a little brown sugar. That does sound amazing. Okay, so yeah, Abby, mashed pot burritos. Yes. Hobo packs. Yes. That's a wonderful camping meal. And you can wrap it in the foil, let your oils from your meat cook, your vegetables and your other pieces, and you're wrapping it in that tin foil. That's a wonderful option. We cook a lot of, we call them the hobo packs too. We cook a lot of those with our students, and in the front country too. Burritos sound good. Yeah, right up your alley. Not sure what the cleanup for the burrito while also following L&T. Yeah, good call, Jen, because, really with Leave No Trace, you're supposed to be packing out any of the food scraps as well, right? And, there are folks that might believe in burying that. We do believe trying to pack out all of your waste, which is a lot of why most of the time we're cooking and eating out of Ziploc bags. And that way you can pack that Ziploc bag up and just go. And so great point. And yeah, so there's somebody brave soul out there wants to try the egg in the bag. Let me know how that goes. I want to try it as well. Oh, good. Popcorn with coconut oil and salt. Yeah, that's a real treat on the trail. Very, very, very cool. And so lots of good ideas, and so just a couple more tips and we'll close up our time together. So we're getting near the end of our session. We've spoken of this a few times, but think through the storage and the disposal. And that includes things like hanging the food at night so that not just bears, but squirrels or mice, right, don't get into your, or raccoons. I literally have had a raccoon haul off a Lunchmate container from my campsite, and so those sneaky little guys will come for your food. Use brown bags for veggies, right, instead of Ziploc or plastic bags, because the moisture will damage and accelerate the spoiling of some of those veggies, right? But if you bring, say, a head of broccoli or some peppers, brown bag, that lets it breathe a little bit. Double bag your powdered items, and so things like trail mixes and granola and pudding. What I would do, here's a really good fruit medley to kind of mix into your trail mixes. But these big old trail mixes, I would put these in a quart-sized freezer bag or a Ziploc, and I would double that. And yeah, I had to open 2 to have some of it and eat it, but I know that if I pierced one of them, which inevitably happens, that it's not going to end up all over, my backpack or all over the campsite. And same with these, the chocolate puddings, I'll actually, these are way too much for one person, right? 6 servings for a container. So you can divide up one box of this into, as many as you want, 6 different servings with the appropriate amount of this non-fat milk. Put that in a separate Ziploc bag. I like to double that bag, right? And that way, if it gets pierced, then, and the bag weighs nearly nothing. But you have an extra bag to dispose of, any extra trash or wrappers or anything like that from your meal. As we've spoken of already, variable heat is the key for varied food. And so, if you're able to, if you're getting more advanced in the backcountry cooking, shaking up the temperatures, practice these things, boiling, frying, roasting, baking. A little just it's good to prepare something at home first and just have some experience making it again, so you're not hungry, out on the trail. And then refrigeration options, and you can be creative with these. I like to bring an adult beverage on the trail, and you can put that in the mountain stream, right, and soak it in with let the cool water refrigerate your food. But do be conscientious that critters will go and get food out of said colder water. Of course, if you're in the winter or you're in a mountainous area and you have snow or ice, you can use that to your advantage with cooling your stuff. Another thing is, I mentioned earlier, the drink packets. If you're able to collect clean snow, put it in an Nalgene, put in a Crystal Light, or put in some sort of, you shake that up, and you've got a mountain fresh slushy on the trail. These are nice little treats from time to time. Last thing is just to be able to improvise and be creative. People in the backcountry have done some pretty amazing things, and without bringing extra equipment. Using a water bottle as a rolling pin, using a canoe if you're in the canoeing backcountry, as a kneading circuit, cleaning the bottom, put a little flour down. You can, again, you get it pretty advanced in terms of making. That might be Abby and her pizza dough. Rolling that out on in the backcountry. So those are just a few more tips and tricks for backcountry cooking. And yeah, avid campfire cooks, I can see that, and that's wonderful. And Lynn O'Brien, thank you, Lynn. Great to know that's you. That is interested in trying the egg in a bag. That may be a fun one for. I know Lynn has been a part of our Trailblazers program with her students over the years, and that may be a fun one to try on a future Trailblazers camp out. And so those are just a few more tips and tricks. So if you're interested in trying this with a group, just want to make a little plug for our Beginning Backpackers Trek that we're going to take. I am planning to facilitate this trek. It's an overnight trek in mid-May on the Tecumseh Trail. Would love to have you or anyone else that is interested in this to join us. We've tried to make the price point both approachable and yet, to help us further our mission, with young people at Camptown. And so love to have you join us there, try some of the recipes. Thank you for joining our workshop. If you found this content helpful, would just invite you to be a part of our mission. And thank you, many of you already have and sort of contributed in a way that you're able. At this point, I'm going to pause and just take questions, and that's it for my slides, and just 7